It was a bitterly cold night in rural Hokkaido. Snow fell silently over the deserted train station, blanketing the world in white stillness. Under the dim orange glow of a flickering platform light, a soft cry pierced the silence. There, on a wooden bench near the end of the platform, lay a newborn baby girl. She was wrapped in a thin cotton blanket, her face red from the cold. A small feeding bottle sat beside her, and on her chest, carefully pinned to the blanket, was a folded note. "Please save this child. I have named her Chiyo. May she find happiness." Station attendant Yoshida, an older man, who had just finished checking the tracks for the night, saw the tiny bundle and froze. For a moment, he thought it might be a cruel prank. But then she whimpered again. "Oh my God," he whispered, his breath fogging in the cold air. Without hesitation, he took off his own coat and wrapped it around the baby. He cradled her in his arms, shocked at how small she was. She was still warm, barely. The baby, now officially registered as Chiyo, was taken by the police and later transferred to a child welfare center in Sapporo called Himawari no Ai, the House of Sunflowers. No one came looking for her. No mother, no father. Just a name written in a stranger's handwriting and the echo of a cold winter night. Despite her tragic beginning, Chiyo was a quiet and unusually alert baby. She rarely cried, and when she did, it was soft, almost apologetic. The caretakers often said she was an old soul, calm, thoughtful, always watching.
Life in the shelter. A wide shot of Himawari no shelter with children playing in the snow outside. Chiyo at 3, watching other kids being picked up by families, expression unreadable. As she grew, the other children at the shelter often came and went, some adopted, some returned to distant relatives. But Chiyo remained. She was the child no one picked, the one whose file gathered dust. Still, she smiled often. She helped the younger children tie their shoes, wiped their tears, and offered her blanket when someone felt cold. At night, she would trace the outline of the moon from her window and whisper to it, "Where are you, Mama?" When Chiyo turned 6, a volunteer teacher named Miss Yuki started coming to the shelter. She taught the children how to read, paint, and fold origami. Chiyo took a special interest in paper cranes. "They say if you fold 1,000 cranes, your wish will come true," Miss Yuki said one day, handing her a pile of colorful paper. "What should I wish for?" Chiyo asked. Miss Yuki smiled gently. "That's for you to decide." From that day forward, Chiyo folded cranes, one every night before bed. She hid them in a box beneath her bed, counting them like precious coins. She never told anyone her wish. But in her heart, she knew. She wished to belong. One spring morning, a man and woman came to the shelter. They were quiet, kind-looking, dressed in simple clothes. They asked to meet the children who had not yet been adopted. The staff gathered a few of the older children, including Chiyo, now 9. She stood in the back, holding her paper crane in her hand like a secret. The couple introduced themselves as Mr. and Mrs. Sakamoto. They had lost their only child 3 years ago in a traffic accident. Now, they were hoping to open their hearts again. While most of the children smiled and chattered, Chiyo remained silent. She wasn't sure if she believed in happy endings, but something in Mrs. Sakamoto's eyes, deep and sorrowful, made her hesitate. At the end of the visit, the couple quietly asked the shelter director if they could return to spend more time with Chiyo. It wasn't fast. It took months of meetings, visits, and legal paperwork. But slowly, Chiyo began to open up to the Sakamotos. They brought her picture books, helped her plant sunflowers in the garden, and once took her to a lakeside picnic. Mr. Sakamoto told silly jokes. Mrs. Sakamoto held her hand when crossing the road, something no one had done for her in years. Chiyo laughing for the first time in years during a picnic at the lake. One rainy afternoon, Mrs. Sakamoto knelt beside Chiyo, brushing damp hair from her face. "We want you to come home with us," she said softly. Chiyo's hands trembled. She didn't speak for a long time. Then, she reached into her coat pocket and handed Mrs. Sakamoto her most perfect paper crane. "Okay," she whispered. Chiyo's new life was full of warmth, homemade meals, bedtime stories, her own room with sunflower curtains. The Sakamotos weren't perfect. They didn't always understand her silence, her nightmares, or her habit of checking the door locks twice. But they never gave up on her. A silent dinner where Mr. Sakamoto cracks a joke and Chiyo quietly smiles. Chiyo learning to ride a bicycle, falling and being picked up by Mrs. Sakamoto. At school, Chiyo struggled to make friends at first. She didn't talk about her past, the train station, the note, the feeling of being left behind. But over time, she made one true friend, Haruka, a bold girl who didn't care about normal. Together, they shared secrets, traded lunchbox items, and giggled over silly drawings. Still, on cold nights, when the wind howled like it did the night she was found, Chiyo would wake up sweating. She would tiptoe to the window and stare out into the darkness. "Why did you leave me?" she'd whisper. But no answer ever came. When Chiyo turned 12, the shelter sent her a small box of her old belongings, children's drawings, an old toy rabbit, and the original note found with her at the station. She had never seen it before. Her hands shook as she unfolded the yellowing paper. "Greater than, please save this child. I have named her Chiyo. May she find happiness." There was no signature, no clue. Just that name, Chiyo, chosen by someone who walked away. She didn't cry. Instead, she sat for a long time holding the note. Then she folded it, carefully, tenderly, into a crane. Number 1000. She placed it on her windowsill. By the time Chiyo reached high school, she had become known as a talented artist. Her sketches often depicted abandoned places reclaimed by beauty, a flower blooming in an old shoe, a tree growing through a crumbling house, a train platform glowing under the moonlight. When asked what inspired her, she would say, "Stories that begin in the dark." She dreamed of becoming a children's book illustrator, to tell stories of hope, healing, and belonging. Stories like her own. And she never forgot the shelter, or the children still waiting. Every summer, she returned to Himawari no as a volunteer, folding cranes, reading books, and whispering to little ears, "You are not forgotten." One snowy day, at age 17, Chiyo found herself back at the very train station where she was abandoned. It hadn't changed much. The same bench. The same flickering light. She sat for a while, letting the silence speak. Just as she was about to leave, an elderly woman with graying hair sat beside her. She looked tired, with eyes that seemed to carry decades of regret. They spoke little. But as the woman stood to leave, she glanced at Chiyo and said, almost inaudibly, "You were wrapped in a yellow blanket. You had the softest cry." Chiyo's breath caught in her throat. "Do I know you?" she asked. But the woman only smiled, painfully, and walked away, disappearing into the snow. Whether the woman was her mother or a stranger carrying her own regrets, Chiyo never knew. But she didn't need to. Because she had chosen her life, and been chosen in return. Years later, Chiyo published her first book, The Girl on the Platform. It told the story of a baby left behind, not in sadness, but in hope that someone would find her and love her. The dedication read, "Greater than, to all the children waiting on cold benches. You are not alone. Your story is not over." Symbolic visuals: a paper crane drifting through the air, landing beside a sleeping infant. The same crane placed in a bottle, floating in a river under starlight. Her adopted parents and Haruka cheering at her book launch. Chiyo narrating, "Not all beginnings are warm. But they can still bloom." Final shot: the old bench at the train station, now empty, peaceful, and complete.